Okay, we'll get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this highly oversubscribed session. Your last session for the conference. We'll make sure you leave it with a smile. So thanks for joining us. Yeah, please come on in. Okay. We scared a couple away.
There's more tickets available.
Okay, so this is the topic of the session, just for you to double check that you're indeed in the right room. My name is Apurva Pratap. So I manage the distribution and marketing for IHG, Intercontinental Hotels Group, for all our hotels within Europe. And our definition of Europe is quite strange. We go all the way down to Turkey and Mongolia on the east. So I deal with the issues that we hope to talk about today on a day-to-day basis. It's a key part of my job. As you all have probably read in the description of the event, we really want to talk about the digital marketplace and the impact it's having in travel in particular. Of course, there's elements of that we've talked a lot about, in particular the growth and dominance increasingly of some digital platforms within the digital travel industry. But what we've not talked too much about is the fact that the regulatory authorities are taking a lot of notice about what's happening in case of these digital platforms, and is doing a lot of investigations even beyond what is apparent in the press. And that we thought would be a really interesting topic to shed some more light on, particularly because, in particular, the regulatory authorities are really interested in hearing from individual hotel owners or hotel management companies or hotel investment companies. And it's quite hard for them to reach out because the industry is so disparate. But at the same time, in essence, they see the single biggest job is to protect consumers and is to protect small and medium enterprises. What you have heard a lot about is intermediaries and hotel companies, hotel brand companies, talking a lot about rate parity and how we should merchandise on our websites, how we should merchandise on online travel intermediaries, particularly issues around rate parity, price advantage, real or misleading. But of course, on top of that, where is the guest? Is the guest, the end consumer, actually better off due to the growth of these digital platforms and their prevalence across all aspects of the travel landscape increasingly? And that, again, is really relevant, particularly because, as we said, from a regulatory perspective, that's the thing that's key. What is the impact on consumers? What's the impact on small and medium enterprises? So those are the three topics we will try to cover. In a few minutes, we'll start a sort of question-answer panel. And my colleagues will introduce themselves at that point in time. We will have time, I'm sure, for some audience questions as well. And we'll summarize with talking specifically what is it that all of you, to the extent you're interested in this topic, want to actually play a role in shaping the future of our industry, the future of the policy, regulatory environment in which we operate, what you all can do as well. But given that some elements of this topic, particularly the regulatory side, there's not full awareness of, we thought it would be useful to spend the first 10, 15 minutes just giving you a quick sense of sort of what is happening from a regulatory perspective and why. So as all of you are aware, the digital marketplace is completely redefining the relationship that the hotel has with the end customer across the booking, the pre-stay aspect. Of course, we know about that, but also during the stay and post-stay. So within that, data, big data, which we've all talked a lot about, on the one hand, allows you to really personalize the experience, be incredibly targeted in your marketing, but also puts a much higher burden on us in terms of data security, data privacy, etc. So that's an important topic. Relating to that, from a pre-stay perspective, the ability you now have to find exactly the right hotel is increasing dramatically. I don't know if all of you have seen, Facebook's graph search. The whole idea with that is to say, for you to be able to say, hotels in this city that my friends from college really liked, or really, really personalized to you and your network in terms of making recommendations, or the ability now increasingly, which has been in the airlines for a long time, but now increasingly across the hotel industry, to use your mobile device to do those administrative tasks quicker, whether it's check-in, check-out, get the folio sent, directly to your administrative assistant, etc. Things like within your stay, actually being really able to quickly make those guest requests about the kind of pillow you want, or even the kind of room you'd like to stay in, the floor, close to the lift, etc. Get that directly into the workflow management of the staff, so you can deliver the best possible customer service. And almost to the sort of futuristic end of, if you'll have seen the Tom Cruise film Minority Report, where you actually know the person, they know that you're walking by, and the digital screens will actually give you a communication that's appropriate to who you are. And that's also something, of course, that's being tested across the world, in China and Europe, through things like iBeacon. So, of course, digital is coming into every aspect of the journey, but where it's been arguably most disruptive is in that first part, that pre-stay booking stage, where as digital just came on, as we all know, initially consumers went more directly to the hotel companies, the hotel brand companies, to make that purchase decision. What's quickly happened, as you're all aware, is that you've had these booking brands now interject in that journey. And they come, of course, in various flavors. There's the first search, where Google, of course, is dominant. Then you now have the meta search, which adds the price comparison element and the guest reviews element, where TripAdvisor, which was owned by Expedia, is dominant globally, but then within that, Trivago is very strong in Europe, which is owned by Expedia, and Kayak, very strong in America, which is owned by Booking.com, but is comprised of former Expedia employees. And then, of course, this whole world sort of plays in a very interlinked way. Booking.com is the largest advertiser, the largest customer of Google. Several $1 billion are paid by Booking.com to Google. If you now go to TripAdvisor, most of their traffic comes through a mobile device. In the mobile device, they show you 4 rates. Typically, 3 of the 4 rates will take you to Booking.com, because TripAdvisor Instant Booking is powered by Booking.com, or you can go to Booking.com, or you go book now to Booking.com, or you can go to Expedia and Hotels.com. So, this whole infrastructure is very quickly consolidated into a few key players that are also interlinked. And that's one of the natures of the digital market, that you quickly have the next network externalities that can get you to have dominance very quickly. And that's true for travel. That's true across the board. If you think about mobile devices, there's really just the Apple Store and the Google Store. If you think about online purchases, the way Amazon has become dominant in America, now 50% market share of all online purchases, growing rapidly here. So that's why this is an area that regulatory authorities are very interested in. One of the reasons that all of us are interested in it is that it has been disruptive in terms of cost of sale and profitability for hotels. So in America, where we have better data, and we've got data from the American Hotel and Lodging Association, which really comprises of almost the entire industry, we're able to see that just in the last few years, the cost of sale, the commissions paid to intermediaries, has grown at twice the pace of revenue. It's harder to get that degree of accuracy across Europe, get the data from all the hotels. But for example, CBRE presented recently across the UK for the hundreds and hundreds of hotels they work with. What they've seen is that little over the last decade, the cost of sale from intermediaries has increased eightfold. And as a consequence, there's been huge pressure on the bottom line of hotels, as you can imagine. What is interesting about Europe, in many ways the world's largest hotel market, in terms of revenue, the same size as the US, key in terms of inbound and outbound. But what's unique about Europe, of course, is that it is the most fragmented market in the world. It's the place where only 40% of hotels are through branded companies. 60% are literally mom and pop businesses with 10 employees and so on. And that in particular has meant that there's a dramatically higher propensity for customers to use intermediaries in Europe versus America. They're poles apart. But what is interesting is that the number one reason why regulatory authorities like platforms is because they believe it gives the opportunity for the small guy to expand its marketplace. It gives the small guy the opportunity to sell its product, its hotel, to a global market rather than a local market, rather than a small Italian hotel just having an Italian website. It gives you access to websites speaking all different languages and customers around the world. That's the number one thing from a regulatory perspective. They think, well, that should help the small and medium enterprises. What's been quite interesting, and we have seen this for certain in America, because all hotels provided information on their commission rates, is that the smaller the hotel, higher the commission you pay to the intermediary. And that could be one of the reasons why, interestingly, even though Europe is an environment where independent hotels are able to thrive more so than anywhere else, actually in the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen no growth, zero growth from independent hotels. So that has been quite interesting to the regulatory authorities because it's quite counter to the basic logic of the value that platforms create, that they should help the little guy. So with that, I mean, one of the interesting pieces is to really think about why has there been such a rapid growth in these platforms? So now looking at the consumer side, what is it that consumers really value about these platforms? And that's interesting to see, a quasi-independent party, I guess, Google, kind of with their own research on several thousand respondents, to ask, okay, so why is it exactly that you're booking through an online travel agent? And very clearly, they highlight its price. It's the fact that I'm getting a lower price because I'm booking through an online travel agent. And that is quite interesting for regulatory authorities because the thing that for last several years the online travel agents have said has been critical to the survival of their business is the concept of price parity, the concept that the rate on the online travel agent has to be the exact same as the rate on hotel websites, even though there might be a 20% cost of sale difference. And in fact, there's well over 100 lobbyists from just 2 intermediaries that are talking about this specific topic, the importance of maintaining the right of insisting on price parity. So when that's the case, why is it that the single biggest reason that people are booking through them is because they're getting a lower price? That can't quite be right. Which is why the Department of Justice at the European Commission has been looking at what they call the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, which has been enshrined into law in all the European Union countries, and really to understand how does this law and how should this law apply to price comparison sites to online intermediaries, particularly relating to accuracy of price and price advantage. Because this dichotomy exists. There should be no difference in price, but the single biggest reason consumers are going is to get a price advantage. So in that, one of the things that they're looking at is it's quite interesting. When you go to an online intermediary website, Booking.com and Expedia, Hotels.com, pervasively you'll see that there's big discounts on these hotels. And by the way, there's a 45% discount on the hotel. There's only 2 rooms available at that price, and 13 people are looking at that room right now. So you are a booking genius because you got that deal just in time, right? So when you examine what is that, right? When you look at what is that 45% discount, if you actually bother to click, it will say, well, this is based on prices currently being quoted by the hotel for a 30-day window around your check-in date. That's not quite right. What this is a comparison of the single most expensive transaction that happened 60 days around your booking date. Let's find the most expensive transaction. Let's find how much this hotel sold the one room that was not taken up by the conference, and say that's the typical price for the hotel, and wow, you've got a 45, 60, 80% discount on that deal. So that price, the price against which you're offering an advantage, is not actually bookable. That price does not exist for those dates. So that's a price advantage that, in the terms of the law, the way it's laid out today, is illegal, because that is not a true price advantage. So how do we clarify that? And then what are the penalties for actually abusing the law? It's much clearer to understand, well, the law is being abused, but okay, so now, apart from self-regulation, which is what regulatory authorities normally hope is the best practice, right? I've just let you know, this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing it, let's stop. This is such a lucrative practice that self-regulation doesn't work. And which is why there's actually been a consultation by the Department of Justice to ask all the hotel companies to say, to talk about these different things like price advantage. We'll talk about the others and say, what is the way to tackle it? Is it through self-regulation? Will it not normally happen through, the commercial market, the dynamics of, the economy, or does regulation actually have a role? So the other areas they look at is transparency about the business model. If you now go to TripAdvisor, almost every aspect of TripAdvisor is paid for, but actually doesn't give you that impression. You think of TripAdvisor as a free service as a customer. Criteria for search results ranking. So when you typically look at any online travel agent, the default sort order, which typically is what you use 90% of the time, very few people actually use a different sort order, is typically called recommended or favorites for you, and so on. Now, the reality is, as we all know, there are many commercial factors that drive that sort order. Expedia has gone out publicly and said they're going to actually have an auction model where you can auction for top spot and so on. So it's clearly commercial factors that drive the sort order. By the law, you're required to say that actually that sort order, for example, is based on commission. You can't say recommended, because that gives the impression to the customer that it's something that's purely based on consumer factors and what's right for that individual. Identification of advertising. So Google, if you think about Google several years ago to where it's evolved now, when you search for a hotel, you now see Google Maps, you now see what they call the rich list, but it's all of these listings of hotels. Even if you ask for a particular hotel, they'll show you listings of various hotels, which pictures, a little bit of description, etc. Nowhere does the maps or that listing say there was an advertising slot. But actually, that is an advertising slot, and a much more expensive advertising slot, often 15, 20 times what that keyword search, which just does say advertising, is. So here there's advertising which is not identified as advertising. And that is sort of against the law as well. Authenticity. Yes.
For me, it's just so appalling what I hear.
Yeah.
And where are our consumer protection? I mean, this is not new. We have to live with that
Yeah.
for so many years already. I mean, I'm just sorry that I have to say, but it's so
Yeah, yeah.
appalling when I hear it.
No, we'll come back to all of this. The crux they're finding is that these laws have been created to protect consumers, and they want consumers to come and say, I have an issue with this. What they're now realizing is that in the world of platforms, there are two-sided markets. One is the market between the supplier, i.e. the hotel, and the platform. That's one market. And there's another market between the platform and the consumer. Because of the dominance of platforms, they're now realizing that the supplier also needs to be able to say, wait a minute, I'm not happy with the way the platform is dealing with these issues, because it really matters as well. So this fact, the fact that the supplier matters as well, and the supplier should be able to put up their hand and say, I have a complaint that this is not being dealt with. That has not been enshrined in the law today, and that's one of the aspects they need to change.
There is a study done on the US market, and the study is what is the cost of deception for consumers? Meaning they don't find finally what they look at. Here is $1 billion. So that's a huge question for consumers.
All right, so authenticity of user reviews. So this is where people are looking at. There's a lot more belief in the accuracy of reviews from TripAdvisor, let's say, than from a hotel company that's actually been able to verify that the person has stayed at the hotel. So, for example, you might have heard that Which did a investigation, that's what they call it, where they created a fictitious hotel. Then they wrote fictitious reviews on the fictitious hotel. Then they called TripAdvisor and said, we think someone is writing fictitious reviews on our hotel. Can you investigate? And TripAdvisor came back and said, no, these are not fictitious reviews. So they published that in their magazine, which 1 million people read. But that sort of thing, Therefore, now Amazon, for example, is required to say, this is a review from someone who's actually bought that product. And that kind of regulation one would think about. So, of course, price perception is a big issue, which is why, as you know, all the major hotel companies have now started offering what they are allowed to today, which is a closed user group price, a lower price if you book direct and are part of the closed user group loyalty program. The trouble is that the platforms immediately reacted and said, okay, you are technically allowed to do that, but if you actually tell anyone about it, we'll stop working with you. So therefore, all of these rates are not actually visible where customers look for them, which is in price comparison sites, like a TripAdvisor, Trivago, etc. So that's one of the aspects that needs some work on. And that's one of the reasons why the European Commission, which has created a few key priorities, probably the top one of them is called the digital single market. It's to realize, how do we create an environment where digitization of commerce is actually a force for good, not a force for evil? So that's the objective. And within that, therefore, they've done a major consultation, and they were surprised to get over 1,000 responses, which is one of the most they've ever got, on specifically the aspect of platforms, and then relating to that, the relationship, for example, between suppliers and platforms. It's asking specifically, do platforms require you to create rate parity? Is that a good thing or bad thing? What are the good things that come from that? What are the bad things that come from that? What are other restrictive trade practices, and so on? So they've just got all the responses back end of December. They already came out with a press release saying, that they were surprised at the extent to which people felt some action needed to be taken relating to platforms, and specifically that people felt that it's actually regulatory action that is needed, and that self-regulation methods are unlikely to work in this case. So they're going to come out in May with sort of more formal recommendations, and they want to execute their recommendations by the end of this year. Similarly, the Department of Justice has finished their consultation as well at the end of last year, and wants to come out with their recommendations around how unfair commercial practices apply to price comparison websites, online intermediaries, etc., in the next few months as well. One of the things that you know is that Booking.com kind of proactively went to certain markets and now has done it on a pan-European basis and said, well, the answer really is this concept of narrow parity, that they need to be able to maintain parity with the hotel, but all the other OTAs can have a lower price. As you know, what that effectively means is that you're giving OTAs that have a higher cost of sale than your own direct website another advantage, which is a truly lower price. In that scenario, we are not aware of any OTA that's even approached a hotel company to say, can we use this narrow parity? But just to make sure, Booking.com did send a note to every hotel and then followed up with calls from the market managers to say, but just in case you do offer someone a lower price, it will impact your sort order. So when that regulation, that self-regulation, came in through France, Italy, and Sweden, France actually, the government went a step further and said, no, actually, we think price parity should be banned altogether. And so they actually went ahead and did that sort of June of last year. Germany had a slightly different approach where the sort of cartel authority looked at it and said, well, the largest players, HRS and Booking.com in that market, they should not be allowed to have price parity. But other players, like an Expedia, can be allowed to have price parity. What they are now needing to kind of look into and investigate is that someone like Expedia might not be dominant in Germany, but might be dominant in the rest of the world, and the extent to which that strength and the fact that there are MFN clauses that mean that you can't negatively treat one platform relative to the other, that hotel companies are required to sign, that sort of ties you up such that you can't really act on the regulation in Germany the way you can in France. And in France, where you can act on it, many, many hotel companies have now started really a web saver rate where you just get a low rate for booking direct. And it's not a closed user group rate. So it's been much harder for price comparison sites like a Trivago or TripAdvisor, to not actually show that lower rate, because now there are no terms and conditions. So they are being shown, but again, there is reaction. Expedia sent a note out to every hotel, for example, in France to say, we know this is the law, but we believe the law is unconstitutional, so please ignore the law. Italy, again, there's been no impact of the self-regulation, so then the parliament passed a law to say, well, we should follow the French example and ban price parity across the board. So it's been passed by the lower house. The upper house, the Senate, should get it in a few weeks. And the incredible thing is to actually have 438 people show up in the Italian parliament for anything. But that was quite an achievement, but it's not, we're not quite there yet. But with all of this, particularly when it's the European Commission, they are actually the bureaucrats. And it's actually the Parliament, the European Parliament, that finally passes the law. And this is where the European Parliament has a critical role, because the European Parliament can ask the Commission, their bureaucracy, to investigate particular issues, and they decide what issues should be approved and not. So here I think it's just quite helpful to end on this before we get into discussion. This is an example of a question that was asked quite recently by, I believe, a German member of Parliament to the Commission, which then they're required to investigate and answer. So just quickly, the topic of online purchasing has been getting greater and greater attention, but particularly on the internet, online travel agents seem to be enjoying a monopolistic structure. One group accounts for 60% of all bookings in Europe, and another accounts for most of the remaining. Together, they account for 80% of the global. In a few years, that could be 94%. This concentration of power impacts the pricing of goods offered by dictating contractual terms, which also makes it hard for companies to challenge them, and in the end increases prices for consumers. Tackling these monopolistic structures with a full and well-orchestrated enforcement of competition law should be a major policy goal. What is the European Commission doing about this? So this is quite interesting, kind of the sense of sort of where we are at this point. So hopefully that's kind of set the scene. And with that, I'd like to start inviting my colleagues to kind of give you their sense of the key one or two challenges and opportunities they see in this environment, and also use the opportunity to talk about their role and their interest in this topic. So maybe we could start off with you, Pierre.
Thank you. I'm Pierre Leman. I'm working on Accor Hotel Digital World. I'm in charge of the digital plan, which is a little amount of 225 million, and some digital initiative like marketplace. We book fast booking, perhaps you heard about. We take minority stake in few startups. So I'm in charge to imagine and manage a little bit this initiative. I'm working with Vivek Badrina, who is a very smart guy. He's coming from Orange, so he perfectly knows this new world. And behind us, if I may, for Accor Hotel, we have around 1,000 people who are working on digital plan and initiative. So for us, is a key initiative that we take through the digital plan, and we really want to challenge all this new world and find opportunities for our customers too. Because behind that, it's not only a question of intermediaries, it's a question of new needs of our clients and how to help them, how to imagine the new world of hospitality through digital. And I will say, not only digital, but what we call now phygital, physical and digital world. Because, as we say, you never sleep in a computer. So we have to imagine what will be the interaction, what will be the life, the daily life at hotel level, before and after, through digital and physical world.
Thank you, Eric. Maybe Cody?
Yep. Hi, I'm Cody Bradshaw with Starwood Capital, private equity group. We're not affiliated with Starwood Hotels. We did create them back in the 90s. So And our chairman ran Starwood Hotels through 2005, but we're a real estate owner, although we do own hotel companies. I think the biggest challenge for Europe is it's a fragmented market, fragmented with owners, brands, countries, suppliers, you name it. And therefore, it's just prime for disruption. And clearly, the OTAs have taken advantage of that. I think the positive side is I haven't seen our industry more sort of aligned and organized to try and combat this as I have in recent years. I think many of us were sort of naive in the early part of the last decade. And then we got distracted with the Great Recession. And so when you look at some of the initiatives that are going on in the US and Europe and hopefully soon Asia to try and combat the antitrust and consumer deception issues, I actually am somewhat optimistic that we're actually finally getting our act together and taking action. I think also you see these disruptors actually being disrupted themselves. And so they're feeling the pain and they're losing market share. And it's a great opportunity for us to actually take advantage of more competitors in the space to essentially bring down their leverage that they have over us with commissions. I also think the recent M&A activity is a big opportunity, cross-border M&A activity, because that's another challenge with a fragmented space is so many independent hotels in Europe, and the ones that are branded are actually brands that come from Asia, US, Europe, so they're based all over the place. They aren't even based, all here in Europe to tackle this in Brussels together. But when you see this level of cross-border M&A activity, which I suspect will continue, we sold a large French hotel company, Louvre, to Jinjiang, the Marriott Starwood announcement, and most people would suspect more is coming over the next few years. And so when I look at big M&A deals like that, or Accor bought Fairmont, for me, the number one question I would ask as an owner is, how are we going to leverage this to take on the OTAs? Because if you take Marriott and Starwood combined, I would love to then go sit down with Expedia, Booking.com, and have that meeting. You could essentially have the power to turn one of them off if they misbehave. So, as an owner, you would expect that M&A activity would result in stronger action. In terms of some of the more day-to-day things that I see our hotels and our hotel companies dealing with is really, I think, unethical tactics like bidding on our hotel names. And you can complain and send legal letters to the main OTAs, but it's actually usually not them doing it. It's all this web of small intermediaries that they can't control, that they redistribute inventory to. And half the time they don't even know who these people are. And you track down some SPV with an address, in a tiny office in the Netherlands who's been bidding on all of your hotel names and driving up the cost of your paid search. And then, of course, organic search seems to be a thing of the past because the entire front page is advertising. And so it's this vicious circle where we can no longer afford to compete on the paid search. And that's why I think the recent initiatives that you've seen Google launch, even with their front page, has helped motivate a number of the major owners and brands to actually finally do something about the antitrust and consumer deception issues, because it's gotten completely out of control from a cost inflation standpoint. We're already dealing with so much in the cost department. If you look at the rising wages in the UK, France, and Germany, and the rising commissions, thank God energy's not rising. Thank God, food cost is not out of control, because if those were rising, we would be dead. So we've got to take this opportunity to tackle the commission. And then the last other thing that we struggle with is on the rate parity side, I think it's an amazing development, but one of the challenges that we have is the net rates that we make available to wholesalers, which are still very prominent in Europe. And they make those available on the web, and so you can actually find rates that are lower than what you're publishing on your site. And until you can control those wholesalers, which again is another complicated web of all these small intermediaries, then you're still at risk of people actually, being able to find cheaper rates on other sites than yours.
Thank you, Cody. And that's an interesting new aspect, the onward distribution that we also you need to control, which manifests itself in terms of lower rates, higher cost in search, etc. Theodore, maybe I could get your perspective.
Yeah, my name is Theodor Kubak. I'm working with Union Investment, which is one of the bigger funds here in Germany, also investing in hotels. I think my other hat, which I'm having on today, is the head of Hammer Europe, which is an owners association, hotel asset managers association, which at its core is the increase of hotel asset values. And having said this, I think that's really at the core of the discussion here, because taking away all this, or considering what Apurva has told us, so that the cost of customer acquisition has increased twofold, in some markets I think even threefold, if you look at New York, compared with revenues, then that translates immediately into profitability, and that, of course, translates if you capitalize this profitability on asset value into billions of dollars. And considering this, normally brands and owners are fighting, but here we really have aligned interests. Here we are really aligned on this topic, and it's so great to see us sitting together here and address this topic. I think that's a real opportunity.
Thank you, Theodore. So you know, we have a great panel with us. Cody, if I could ask you to shed some light on your perspectives on kind of a twin related topic. So one is price parity, the price parity regulation. It's shaping up differently in different markets. You know, what do you think is sort of the right answer? And relating to that, we now have this cottage industry of innovative tech companies like Triptease, for example, that is trying to help hotels display and help consumers display where you actually do get the lowest price. But to that as well, there's been reaction from intermediaries. So maybe you can talk on those two topics.
Sure. Yeah, we are, I think the founder of Triptease was presenting here. We've rolled out Triptease in a number of the, on our German portfolio that we have here, on our UK hotel company that has 50 hotels. I love it. It's the coolest little booking widget that I've seen. It basically is a meta search that you feature on your website in the booking engine. It's brilliant, and no wonder the OTAs are freaking out about it.
Can you tell which brands you're talking about? Which hotels do you have?
So we have, in the UK, it's more of a domestic brand. And so I think, and maybe you can answer as to what the larger brands are doing. We have some franchise hotels where we're putting it on our standalone website. I don't know if that's allowed, but that's what we're doing. And it's working. So I think the major brands will probably feature it on their site. But essentially, it is, I think you had an example up here. It's the hotel and a rate, and then all the OTAs. And it's great, especially if you're actually showing a lower rate. So like I said, it's no wonder they're so worked up about it, because I think that's the absolute future, is to incorporate the meta search into your website, at least for third parties. The challenge and we're having some success when we are taking advantage of the new rate parity rules anywhere that we test the best rate guarantee, lower pricing in the North America and Europe. We're seeing increased conversions on our direct website, which makes sense. Anybody who's shopping around and going to TripAdvisor, looking at the reviews, they say, hey, it's 15 euros cheaper here. You know, you're going to see some increased conversion. But I do think it will take some time, because as it was mentioned, the OTAs are combating this with saying, okay, fine, go use your rate parity leverage and watch you drop to the bottom of page 3. And ultimately, Booking.com is seeing way more traffic than any of the major brands or any of our sites. And so as much as the billboard effect can be debated, it is a billboard. And if you want to put competitive rates out there in a prominent position ahead of your competition, then it can't be some inflated rate that you then discount the heck out of so you can have the best rate on your website, you know, and you know, you're cutting off your arm in the process. And so it is a balance of trying to maintain competitiveness on the channel that the consumer clearly prefers, which is our underlying biggest challenge. I love going to Booking.com. I think the website's amazing. And so does every consumer in the world. And it's going to be tough for us to actually compete against that. So I think it would take some time for us to figure out how to leverage rate parity, but it's a huge win in terms of some of the recent regulations.
Pierre, can I get your perspectives?
So about rate parities at first, and I will come back on challenges. On rate parity, we launched only on discount, and to be frank, we have a huge results already. And two reasons. One, around the benefit for the consumer, because what we are doing, we transform a commission for a third party to a discount for the consumer. And clearly the consumer love that. And this consumer understand if I may, the benefit of the loyalty. So for him, it's quite clear. Second results, which is more intangible. We observe through only on activities a strong mobilization at hotel levels. By that, by this news offer, hotels want to recover the control of the top line. And that's great. So before it was a little bit despair. What is the solution? Again, Booking, again, Expedia. Through this new offer, they say, great, I have the opportunity to manage my top line. And that's great. That's more intangible, but that's very obvious now for us. So to be frank, we need the support of public authorities. Why? Because that's critical. We observe sometimes a deranking of our hotels on Booking.com, even if it's not legal. Because they understand that through this battle, it's key for them, because we break, if I may, the only added value of Booking, which is the better price. So we need the support of public authorities to control and be sure that there is not a reprisal against hotels. And as mentioned by Peva, we need to display more this new offer. Perhaps some key points around the challenges that we have to face. I will take some, if I may, a little bit of vision. First of all, 4 points, finally. First of all, as you said, scalability. During a discussion with Fernand to share with you, guys clearly have done a very good job around digital, but some pieces was not here because they don't have the money and they don't have the development team and they don't have the level of maturity of the topic. The key one was very easy, mobile. No mobile solution, no apps. And it cost a lot of money to build it. And behind that, it's a question of scalability. So we clearly have a challenge around our hotels with scalability. Another topic is, even if everybody is thinking around OTA and so, we have to be focused on customer-centric, Probably last year, we was very focused on standardization of our services. And it was our vision to better serve clients. No surprise, everything but the same service everywhere and so. Today, because of digital, we need to reshape our booking approach, meaning more photos, more videos, more informations. Tomorrow is probably next year. 3D visits, it's another challenge, and is not finished. So around booking, but also at hotel level, and that's a new challenge. You already know e-checking, e-checkout, but it's not finished. The guy wants to chat with the employee. The guy wants to have his own music on the room, and so and so. So we have to very think everything around customer and not around digital. So as I said, that's a phygital world. Second challenge is no compromise on data security. If you think the reason why people are choosing hotels since years and years and centuries, is for 3 reasons: security, privacy, and the quality of the welcome. Security and privacy could be breached by the digital world. So we must be very concentrated and very able to guarantee this privacy and security of the data for the customers. And the fourth challenge is, as you said, don't be naive, but also don't be shy. Okay, we have tackled some very big global players like Booking, Expedia, but also Google, TripAdvisor, Facebook. And we know that these guys are financing a big part of the development through our economy, our hospitality sectors. You probably know that Booking is the first client of Google, Expedia is the second one. They are booking around $2 billion of keywords. So that's a big player. And that's moving very fast. If you imagine, if you remember perhaps, 3 or 4 years before, you click and you click for example, Berlin Hotel, and you compare with now. You hotels, by keywords, by commission, by everywhere, we are paying more and more for that. There is no more free CEO. Last example, since November, before to be on the Google Map was free. Now you have to pay. And you don't see that it's you have to pay for that. So, and as you say, we are small, we are diffuse, we are not digital native, but we have some very strong points. We are all of us are very agile. And I will just keep three key principles. First, and we are sure at that hotel level, and we know that IHG have the same approach, and Marriott too, big player, big chains have to support the industry. We are not playing only for us. We are playing for small and medium players. Because if independent and hotels don't have money to better serve clients, is all our industry which is have some problems. We have to educate our consumer. They don't know what the cost of what they are doing. I'm sure that no customer knows that he spends money, a lot of money, when he clicks on the keywords. He don't know that TripAdvisor is a cost of money for hotels. And as soon as we explain that, they are ready to change. Because what do they choose? They choose an hotel, not an intermediary. So we have to educate our consumer, and government and authorities have to help us. And third key principle, we have to be ready for the next wave. That's not finished. The next wave will be around big data, will be around security, will be around IoT. We know that. And by that, I really think that hotel has to be prepared and equip the hotel. On the asset point of view, it's not only a question of building, it's also a question tomorrow of equipment, digital equipment. If we do that, we are ready to monetize.
Okay, great. So you can see that Pierrick read a thesis on this topic. So thank you, Pierrick. So last question just for Theodore and Cody before we can turn over to some audience questions. So one of the things Pierrick talked about was, for example, the mobile app. Because with the mobile app, you bypass Google, you bypass intermediary, you bypass meta search as a cost of sale. So that's one of the ways. But from your perspective, first Theodore, maybe then Cody, what are the different things that owners can and should be doing to try to sort of improve the bottom line? Is there a significant bottom line impact, and what can and should owners be doing to try to improve the bottom line?
Yeah, I've tried to point out before, there is indeed, I think there was a study made in the US which suggested that this net revenue impact is around about $406 million, 2014, I believe it was. Now, that doesn't seem to sound a lot. But if, as I'd mentioned before, if you just capitalize this by 6%, what would that mean? 6 billion, 6.7 billion in value for a property. So From our perspective, from an owner's perspective, we have an inherent interest to make sure that there is a direct relationship between the brand and the guest, that there is a decrease in the cost or some kind of justification for the increase in costs or diminishing the costs, and then try to get away from this commoditization of the hotel room to increase the profitability.
Okay, thank you. And Cody?
I think there's some practical things that we do. I mean, we spend a lot of time, it's the irony in this is this topic is such a huge opportunity for us from an investment standpoint, because we spend all our time looking for hotels that are running 60% OTA, and we've got a great business plan already without doing anything else. And so there's a lot of money to be made in terms of just, finding the opportunities of hotels that are, 10, 20 years in the past, and putting in some practical solutions. I think we spend a lot of time, we invest a lot of money in enhancing our digital platforms in the hotel companies that we own. We do own several companies. We own a large extended stay hotel company in the U.S. called In Town Suites. We're one of the largest hotel companies in the UK, and so we're constantly reinvesting in upgrades to that platform. So that's just a constant ongoing thing. We also look at some of the direct channels like call. Europe is still very heavy in voice reservations. I tried to get the stats. We own the 1,000-room Park Inn here in Berlin, and you would not believe the percentage of voice reservations into it that are direct. I mean, I'm talking 20, 30%, and this thing's running 90% occupancy. So you can do the math. I couldn't believe it. We have an entire call center dedicated to this. And so if you can actually focus on better training and improving conversions on that low-cost channel, then that's a good tactic. I think in terms of what the industry could do better, because I think we spend a lot of time kind of pointing at the OTAs, and we need to spend some more time looking at ourselves in the mirror, is things like guest recognition and CRM. And my favorite example is the typical check-in experience at a hotel. And so we had a large hotel that we own that I used to go to all the time, major brand, and every time I showed up, is this your first time visiting the hotel? Is this your first time in Paris? And I'd stayed at the hotel 65 times in the last year. I mean, how basic is that right now? That might have been an excuse 10 or 15 years ago, but you were giving the example of voice recognition technology where I can walk down the sidewalk and some wall knows who I am and tries to sell me something. And we as an industry literally still have not gotten something as basic as I check in and you know how many times I've stayed at your hotels or that hotel. And until we get that right, we deserve to be treated as a commodity and distributed around the web. And so I think when you look at the companies that are doing it right, like a Firmdale or a Kimpton, shout out to Kimpton Robert, IHG's great new brand, which has a distinct personality and a great loyal following. They didn't have much scale. Kimpton's 40, 50 hotels in the US, but incredible loyal following that books direct because you're offering them a unique, personalized experience. On the other end, you can actually have scale and be a Holiday Inn or a Premier Inn and Travelodge and provide a network and consistent service and quality, and essentially be very aggressive with the OTAs and almost demand that the customers book direct, and they will. But if it's that middle part where most of the industry sits, where we still are sort of a homogenous product, way too many brands out there, and you don't even know who I am when I check in, that's a lot more susceptible to being disrupted at the entry point of booking. And so I think that's the part that we need to work on beyond the more technical aspects of improving booking engines and whatnot.
Thank you, Cody. Are there any questions from the audience? Anything they'd like to ask? Yes, go ahead.
Well, I actually agree with Cody. I think what always amazes me at these forums, so we always look towards the OTAs that suggest they're all bad guys out there. The reality of the matter surely is that we've been exceptionally lazy in our industry to think of alternatives or how we could actually deal with that threat. And even if we look back in recent history and see what Marriott and all the big brands tried to do when they created room service, that hasn't really taken off, has it? Because that sort of fell away.
You mean room key?
Room key, well,
yes. Yes. It's in the same place where room service is. So.
That hasn't really gone anywhere. And interesting what Accor is doing now, because Accor, you're now inviting, for one
Sure.
independents onto your website to actually market and distribute them. And I'd be intrigued to know how much Aqua proposes to charge in terms of commissions to provide that service, which is probably very equivalent, or not far off what perhaps the OTAs are doing as well. Isn't it a fact that even in this room here, that a number of us would have used an OTA to book our hotel room belly this week? Now, I'm not a great fan of OTAs incidentally, but it's a fact. We do that because of the convenience. That's why we do it. Because it's an easy, as you said, Corey, using bookings.com is a very easy way to actually make a reservation anywhere in the world, quite simply. And the reason why it's so easy for us to do that is because we haven't got the time or the energy to actually shop around to be able to find alternatives out there. And until we are, as hotel brands, as owners, actually find solutions to this, the market will continue to grow for OTAs. The other issue for me is, if I may, one other issue is that we've got very, very lazy. We use an OTAs as a matter of routine. You refer to 60% some of the business actually using OTAs. Although we know that on a Tuesday, Wednesday now, they probably can fill their hotels without using an OTA, but it's just a matter of doing business these days. So whilst I absolutely appreciate that OTAs have grown far too big, I haven't heard enough of what we're actually doing to actually combat this.
Yeah.
How do you best deal with it?
I actually don't think we're being lazy at this point. I'm the first one to actually say we've been lazy in the last decade. I think Core's doing some, you can answer the question on the independent strategy, because I think he had a specific one.
I will make a funny answer. The problem of OTA and Google, that's the same, is the secret of algorithm. Secret of algorithm. So you don't know what is the rules behind the ranking. And that's, for me, the strong and the weaknesses of Booking and Google and Expedia. We change the rules for Accor Hotel. Everything is transparent. So the question around the commission, go to the site and you will have the answer. Okay? For example, and it's a very challenging one. If you choose, for example, Paris 4th, the first answer on the app is not an hotel of Accor. It's a partner hotel. What is the rules? The rule is very simple, kilometer. And that's the same for everybody. So you can say, yeah, wow, it must be a big challenge with Novotel and Mercure and the other brands. Absolutely not. Why? Because they see that we increase the conversion rate for them because we have better traffic. And the rule, everybody wants to know the rules, that's all. And that's so the answer is we have to break the secret of algorithm.
Yeah, but even if we do, I mean, the consumer's still going to have the menu. You guys have done some bold things. I mean, I applaud you for that. And I think your choice, my understanding is you're targeting independents that complement your existing network. So if you're not in an existing ski resort location, you'll sign them up to a core system, and that's very accretive. You know, if you have 10 hotels in one neighborhood, you're not going to go run around and sign up the other 10 independents yet, I guess. But, you know, the OTAs are still, you know, I don't think, they're not going away. And actually, I have to hand it to IHG and Accor and the other stakeholders that are part of this forum to initiate, and some of the, I'm on the calls and the meetings with them, and it's not all up here, but they could do an hour-long presentation and actually the initiatives they're doing to combat this in Brussels and in Washington, D.C. And I have to say, as an owner, it's actually very impressive, because a lot of people are spending their nights and weekends to try and take this on for the industry. So they're not going away, because you can't convince the consumer that a menu of options is a bad thing and they should just go to Marriott.com for all their needs. Try telling somebody not to shop on Amazon. I mean, that would be impossible in my household. So it's, you know, how do you coexist with them, and how do you get enough leverage where you bring down the cost of that relationship? And I think that's all and then how do you deal with the unfair practices with antitrust and consumer deception? So it's leverage to bring down commissions, which I think actually, if you look where we were 10 years ago, we actually have made a lot of, we made a lot of progress. And it is tackling the antitrust and consumer deception issues, which I think we are now making a lot of progress, both educating the consumer and in Brussels, in case in point rate parity, which we've been spent 15 years trying to do. And then the third is just the evolution of the industry to provide something that's actually interesting to the consumer beyond just being a commodity. And the whole guest recognition, the check-in experience that I mentioned. So it's going to be an uphill battle, and who knows what will happen in 5 years, because they'll all be disrupted. The disruptors are being disrupted, and they will all say that. So.
All right, so I think we've run out of time, so we have only one last question. I think you had put your hand up
No,
first.
I just wanted to say that you mentioned that we were lazy, but don't forget that 10 years ago, we had to convince the customer to book online. And this is what they did for us for the past 10 years, really educating the clients that they could book online. And now, now our challenge will be to bring the customers to book online on our site.
Absolutely.
And as a, just a little more thing, and as an independent operator of independent hotels, I can tell you that today our work via Expedia and Booking has become so easy. We open hotels, independent hotels, where we would have, back 20 years ago, have to go, for all over the world to bring clients. Today we can fill up hotels within a week or two with no expense and with no paying a part of the commission, with no paying to any marketing initiatives whatsoever. So that has been amazing for independent operators.
That's a key issue for us too. You're right.
No, I think, sorry, we just need to stick to time,
I have a
unfortunately.
2 o'clock flight.
This is something that you all can clearly talk about and debate for hours. It's such a key, critical topic, and please have an offline conversation. I just wanted to end by saying, the regulators really do want to hear, and they really want to hear from the hotel owners in particular. The conversations with the regulators have happened really, really recently. We have a wonderful opportunity in the next 2-3 months to actually have the regulators hear us before they come out with regulation that they would like to stick for 5 to 10 years. That's the objective, typically, of regulation. If any of you are particularly interested in having your voice heard, then meet me. I'll stay around here for 10-15 minutes. Give me your card, and then I can give you details on how you can meet with officials in the Commission, try to talk to members of Parliament, either at the European level or in your local district, in your country, etc. So thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for the great comments from the panel. Hope you have a happy trip back. He's trying to catch his flight. I'm sure a lot of you as well. So thank you, everyone.